Aloha, everyone. My name is Christina Lainey Mitri, and welcome to Smart Living Hawaii's podcast, where we go over and discuss smart homes and technology, sustainability, healthy lifestyles, and smart business. Today, we'll continue our Sustainable Leaders series and have a short talk story with Lindsay Correa. And she is the Business Development Director of AirCare Hawaii, and she's also a health home consultant. Just a little bit on AirCare Hawaii before we start. AirCare Hawaii helps create a safer, cleaner environment in your home, office, or building. From indoor air quality, extensive mold testing, allergen testing, duct cleaning, HVAC, or emergency response to environmental problems, they are here to serve and also educate you. Today, we'll dive a little deeper on ways to make your home healthier, learn some myths and facts on mold, tending to allergies within your home, indoor air quality, and control. So without further ado, welcome, Lindsay.
Good morning.
Thank you so much for joining us today. And a little snippet on Lindsay before we begin, like I always like to do. Lindsay was born and raised on Oahu, and she grew up as a paddler for outrigger, surfing, playing water polo and volleyball. We'll dive into the water polo a little bit more, maybe some paddling. She graduated from Pietra High School and went to college in Oregon at Southern Oregon University. Also, from my understanding, a very environmental type of school as well. She made her way back to the islands and started her career with her family business in 2008. And she holds a Healthy Homes and Mold Assessment certification. She is also currently training for her Council Certified Indoor Environmental Consultant certification. And she grew to love this field and how it helps many people live healthier lives over time, and has seen the impact that she's making with each and every family that she encounters. So let's dive right in.
All right, let's go.
So I always start with your background, where you grew up, and what you would like to share with your listeners. So maybe your family growing up.
I grew up in Hawaii Kai, went to Pocoid Elementary. Then we moved to town because the traffic got pretty nuts back then, going to my private school at La Pietra. So we moved closer into town. I grew up playing a lot of sports, did gymnastics, ballet, typical family life. Barbecue on the beach, camping, really enjoying the Hawaii life here. Got together with a lot of family and friends. And then I went to high school and I played volleyball. And then once I graduated, I went off to college, which at first I didn't want to go, but my mom said, you have to at least stick it out a year. It was kind of out of my comfort zone to move so far away from home. But after a year, I decided to stay, and I had a blast. College life, no one's there to watch you, but you gain your independence and, new experiences and meet new friends and stuff. So it was definitely awesome.
Awesome. So I know you went to school there for communications, but the school itself was pretty environmental. Yeah, it is Oregon.
It is Oregon, and it's Southern Oregon. So it's pretty, very green, farmer markets everywhere. Their recycling system is awesome. You can literally recycle anything. Everyone's into the environment and making a difference. So, but that's not where it started for me. My auntie helped create the nature center here when I was really, really young. So I was in commercials for composting, and, we did a lot of hiking as a family. And she also helped with the Audubon Society in Maui. And so, and my uncle's an artist, so it was just kind of almost natural for me to kind of find love in the environment and things like that. So, it started from there and it hasn't ended.
Yeah, and so we know each other through mutual friends, and then we also both joined the Eco Rotary Club of Kaka'ako, and we're founding members. What is it? I think we're on our 4th year now. So we have definitely been doing a whole bunch of sustainable work together and volunteering together, which, by the way, everyone should check it out, the Eco Rotary Club of Kaka'ako. If you guys have any questions, you let us know. We'll hook you up. And but I did want to jump into AirCare Hawaii, because I
Okay.
know that you just dived into what brought you to the sustainable world, and it's kind of been something you were born into. And of course, living here in Hawaii helps.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But you know, and wanting to take care of it helps, of course. And then raising families, we kind of have a very similar path in a way. We both went to college on the West Coast. And did you play water polo in college too?
No, just
Just
only in
in
high school. I played water polo for about 5 years. So
Yeah.
yeah.
So we have this common thread of random things that fell into our lives, and water polo is one of them. So anybody
Yeah.
out there wanting to play water polo,
Okay,
throw a ball around, you let us know.
do it. I'm down.
So anyhow, moving on to AirCare Hawaii, I know I spoke a little bit about what it is you guys do as a company, but maybe you can dive a little bit deeper. And we're gonna start with how the company has evolved over time. Let's go there.
Gosh, my dad started the company in 1989, so I was 4 years old, and my mom thought he was absolutely nuts because we had a young family, my brother and I, and at the time nobody really cared about indoor air quality. So his company was called the Ceiling Cleaners, and we did remove popcorn ceiling at the time, and then we started getting into mold and air duct cleaning as well. And then it also transformed into his consulting. And the consulting part is really like his passion, where he goes out and helps commercial, big buildings resolve, people with sick building syndrome or mechanical stuff when it comes to the AC or any type of indoor environmental issue. And then we got a little bit into restoration because we were already doing the mold remediation and removal. And yeah, it's just kind of evolved over the years. And it seems like the indoor air quality industry has just grown and is constantly evolving. But, nobody really cared about it until the last, I want to say 10 years, where now you're starting to hear indoor air quality, IAQ, mold. And the field is, ever evolving and changing. And yeah, it's just something I've grown to love to do, and I'm blessed to get to do it with my family. So that's another plus side.
Yeah, for sure. And
Yeah.
it's really nice to see your family. They're a tight-knit group, and I had the pleasure of going up to their place in Volcano, which was super cool. And looking forward to going back. But they have a lot of outdoor stuff, and this part here, focus on the indoor, is something that we don't really think about for our environment. And when we talk about healthy lifestyles, it's not just outdoor, it's not just taking care of our environment, but it does really matter about indoor as well, because especially during this pandemic, a lot of people have been at home more. A lot of people have been indoors more. And if you do not have good indoor air quality, it actually will be a hindrance to your health. And I think more and more people are seeing that concern. Another area that people are seeing in, like, California example, when they had the fires here in Hawaii, when they have fog, I mean, a lot of this stuff has been coming very apparent and in top of mind, and something that everybody's thinking about. I know my cousins in San Fran, when they had the fires, just keeping the air out and making sure the inside air has like good circulation,
purified, ventilated.
Yeah. So a lot of that kind of thing is on top of mind for so many people. And I wanted to go into some of the things that we either overlook, because a lot of these things you don't see. So when you don't see it, you don't know it, and you're not aware of it, or you're not present of it. So these are the kinds of things that we can pay attention to, look for, reach out to you guys for. And I wanted to start, because it's always such a big thing here, is mold. So let's go into mold, because mold ends up being one of those things that In Hawaii, we don't think as much about it. In the mainland, I think they're really scared about it, but we have a lot of mildew and things like that. So maybe you can jump into some of the top myths that we hear about mold.
Okay. Well, first, you got to understand what mold is. And it's, fungal growth that forms and spreads on damp surfaces. And it also plays a very important part in our environment. So I wanted to dive in with mold myth number 1, which I thought was pretty interesting. Mold has no benefits, which it's a false. Because mold is found in our outdoor environment. It's used in production of certain cheeses, right? Blue cheese. It also is used in the medical field, like penicillium is now penicillin, which I'm actually highly allergic to. It gives me hives because I'm allergic to mold. But so
really?
yeah,
That's
yes,
interesting.
I'm very
So
allergic.
people that are allergic to penicillin might be allergic to mold.
Yeah, I mean, the good thing there's other options out there for them to use, but yeah, it's really important. We need the mold that, it breaks down organic, it helps decomposition in our natural environment. So it's really important. We need it. So number 2, mold myth number 2, repeated mold exposure won't make me sick. However, depending on the individual, long exposures can over time make a person sick. And actually research is finding that Parkinson's symptoms, disease-like symptoms, are linked to long exposure of mold. So, but not everybody is, equal or the same. What you're allergic to may not be what I'm allergic to. So it has to do with what you're sensitive to and what you're exposed to and how long you're exposed to it. So some people, you may not have not common, you may not have toxic black mold in your house, but you might have common indoor outdoor mold. And if you're a sensitive person, you'll still get, you'll still have those symptoms and triggers. So yeah. Mold myth number 3, there should be no mold in my home. That's false too. Mold is everywhere. It's in the air we breathe from outside, and mold spores we don't see. It's usually just mold growth we do. Mold myth number 4, mold is always visible. That's a false. Like I said, mold spores you don't see. So that a lot of the time when we're doing our air sampling, we collect it into a cassette and we send it into a laboratory, and the laboratory has to look it under a microscope. And then they identify the mold species. Unless you see mold growing all over your home, then obviously you have a mold problem. But so therefore it's not always visible. Sometimes it's behind walls due to a water leak or underneath carpet padding, and also in the air we breathe. Mold myth number 5, black mold is toxic. I love this one because the media portrays black mold to be toxic black mold. And however, there's no such thing as black mold because there's 100,000 different species out there, and not all mold is toxic, So the black mold that they're pertaining to is the Stockies and the Chitonium, which can release mycotoxins. And usually you find those from a water event because they're indicative to water damage. Mold myth 6 that I wanted to point out to everybody: using bleach is a good way to kill mold. I think that's like everybody's go-to these days. Oh yeah, I sprayed bleach all over my house. And I'm like, oh, don't do that. It's actually registered on the EPA site under the chemical that it's not efficient in killing mold. And it actually can cause mold to grow back. So I usually recommend, hydrogen peroxide.
It helps it grow back. That's interesting.
Yeah. I mean, and it's highly toxic to our health. So I always try, because I have kids at home, going the, less toxic route for me as much as possible. So I usually use like hydrogen peroxide or a mild detergent, and you just make sure you wipe it and make sure the area is dry. But bleach does not kill or eliminate mold. And a lot of people think that it does, and it doesn't. Sorry, my printer wasn't working today, so I have to read off my computer. You shouldn't worry about a small spot of mold. This depends. If you start seeing mold growing in your home, you have to understand why. And, it's either from consecutive days of, high humidity that creates that surface mold. And so you're going to want to understand that so it doesn't come back, because once spores start populating and growing, even if you eliminate it, it'll definitely come back if that problem is still, remains the same. Or, you may have a water leak of some type. So it's, really important to kind of identify why that mold's there, and then understand how to get rid of it, and then make sure it doesn't come back, because it can lead to a bigger problem in the future, and it can create an unhealthy environment. So mold myth 8, you can clean up mold infestations yourself. Absolutely, depending on the cause and what you feel comfortable with. If it's from surface mold due to, high moisture content in your home, go ahead and clean it up. The EPA guidelines also says you can clean up mold up to a certain feet. So if anybody's interested, you go onto the EPA guidelines and type in cleaning up mold, and it will kind of go through, the procedures and protocols for you to do it yourself. A lot of time when people come to me, they're already, they're freaking out. They're worried about their health. They're having symptoms. So whether it's just surface mold, we offer to provide environmental cleaning, or if it's from a water leak, then we provide mold remediation services. And I think when it comes to especially remediation, you definitely want to hire a professional, because they understand how to dispose of mold safely and kill it safely in your home and make sure it doesn't get dispersed all over the house. So we have to follow certain procedures. And so, yeah. So there's that. And then mold myth number 9, once the mold is gone, it won't come back. This is a false. A lot of people say, can you guarantee that the mold won't come back? Well, I can't, because mold needs water and oxygen to grow. Like I said, it's part of our natural environment. It flies in, and just depending on the material you have in your home and whether you have moisture from humidity or you had a water leak or something, it's going to come back eventually. So it's all about making sure you're doing your due diligence and checking plumbing leaks and making sure, you're keeping the humidity down. You watch the news when it says high humidity on there, maybe run a DHU, have some fans going. Definitely in bathrooms, I see tons of mold, and people freak out about that, but it's kind of normal because it's a hot shower and it's wet all the time. So I always recommend to run an exhaust fan and help dry out those surfaces so the surface mold doesn't grow. And mold myth number 10, I have an air conditioning system, so we won't have any exposure to mold. Well, having a air conditioning system in a home definitely helps people when they're sensitive. It kind of tends to trap the outside air from coming in. So all the pollen and all the mold spores that are flying in an open air space, if you're really sensitive, having air conditioning can potentially help. However, over time, those systems can become really filthy with biofilm and mold, and they do need to be cleaned. And, a lot of people don't realize that, because they don't see it, that they assume that it's clean. But a huge indicator is, you're leaving your home and you feel better, or you're smelling musty smells, or debris is coming out of your vents, or you start seeing, that mold growing, obviously black mold growing. And we always recommend to get the system cleaned every 3 to 5 years, which will also help your electric bill.
Is that something your company does, or is that kind of somebody else does the AC checks and all that?
Oh, no, we come out and do an assessment, and we do residential and commercial.
Okay, actually, I just had a home inspection done on a property, and there actually happens to be some type of leak, and they're not sure if it's condensation or from the AC. So yeah, we're gonna have to. Anyhow, that's so funny. Anyhow, moving on. So these are the kinds of things that I think we don't even think about, and then when we do think about it, we probably have a misperception of it altogether. So thanks for clearing up some of the myths that we might think in our head. We might not think about them and verbally talk about them, but it definitely makes you think about things and then question them. And then when we have further questions, then we can come to someone like you guys for answers. So maybe here's some random questions. I'm not too sure if we've already just covered them, but how would you say mold forms and where is it normally coming from? I know when we do our case study on our house, we'll explain that, but maybe you can just kind of quickly say how it starts.
Well, it obviously starts outside, normally, but are you talking about indoors?
Yeah, indoors, like how we're gonna, like when it's a leak, like what happens?
Usually you normally see some either, okay, so let's say you see mold growing on the outside of your wall and it's, really black or a certain color, and you start seeing, wet water damaged materials. Just assume that whatever's behind that wall is a lot more mold than what you're visually seeing. And so normally, mold needs mold food. Back in the day, wood houses are so much mold food. It's drywall, like paper products, anything organic material, like.
Okay.
And people don't realize that we don't build our homes in bubbles too. So sometimes there's mold spores in our building materials, and all you need is some type of moisture or a water leak, and then boom, you're going to have mold growing. So it all has to do with water, oxygen, and organic material. And the mold will start populating, the hyphae will start populating and growing and spreading. And the mold spores, become airborne when they're trying to reproduce. So as long as it has those three components, then mold will continue to populate.
So how do you actually test for mold?
Well, we use, we provide air testing services. So we use a cassette, it's called spore trap analysis. And I usually like to do 150 milliliters, about 10-minute samples, just to kind of understand and get a good reading. I always recommend to my clients to have the windows closed at least 30 to 45 minutes prior to my arrival, and make sure, they don't do a lot of major cleaning, because when you clean everything, the dust and everything's airborne and it can kind of throw off my samples. It won't be as accurate. And I always require an outdoor sample so I can understand what naturally occurs in that specific area and how much is flying around. And then when I do my indoor sample, I compare the indoors and outdoors along with my visual assessment. And usually with my mold inspection and testing services, we also look for, areas that would, problem areas, sinks, bathrooms, windowsills, toilets, any other indicators where mold might grow because of a leak or something like that. And then we put together a report and we come up with some recommendations.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So let's see. Now that we are here and we kind of explained mold, I wanted to share our experience that we had. So real quick, Lindsay and I have been friends for some time, and I know that she's been in this industry, but I haven't utilized her services before. And we were talking once, and I had just found out our son, my husband first, when he was younger, he had asthma. When he was a younger kid, and a lot of things that affected him was a lot of the pollen. And when he came to Hawaii, mold was a thing for him that would kind of aggravate his asthma. And so when we had our son, he's now 2.5, he's been sick here and there and ended up in the hospital a couple times now, and a lot of it has been like his regular cold turned to pneumonia, and his lungs have been really bad, and it's taken much longer for him to get better. And he just has the sniffles a lot. And what I also was noticing is that my husband has been having the sniffles, and Charlie, our daughter, has also been, kind of coughing a lot in the morning. And so we were just like, for me, I guess I've been blessed with not having as much allergies when I'm older. I know when I was younger in Oahu I did, but just here it hasn't been this bad. And so New Oahu was a lot more moist, and it's been like more tropical rainforest kinds of things and everything. But where we are at is in Aiea area, which is very dry. So I never really thought of there being mold. I never really thought of that being an option. But after talking to Lindsay, she was telling us like, hey, you should really test your home. So, we said, let's do it. So she came over and she did an assessment of, would you want to tell them what you did?
Well, yeah, I mean, and usually we don't always, suggest air sampling. It's just a good baseline for me when people don't physically see mold growing or they don't have an obvious sign. But when you called me in, I came in and, I used my thermal imaging. I checked all those problem areas we discussed: bathroom, sinks, windowsills, and things like that. You didn't have any water leaks. I also, went top to bottom throughout the home and looked visually to see any signs of like dust accumulation or any other indicators of anything that would contribute to indoor air quality or any health symptoms. And then from there, I did my sampling. I think we did 10-minute sampling. I gotta look, but and I also took an outside air. So we did one in the master bedroom, your bedroom because of your hubby, and then Eli's room. And then of course, one for the outdoor sample. So I could compare the indoors to the outdoors.
So when we did this, so for everybody to know, we live on a really high floor in a apartment building, and we are at the end of the building that has a lot of cross breeze. So we don't have AC in ours, and we have every single window, and the bathrooms have windows. Bedrooms have windows, and then it flows right out through the living room and out through the lanai space. So the cross breeze is really great, right? And so we think like, oh, we're in Hawaii, we have this clean air, and it's nice that we have it. It's really cool. And we're not thinking that we're getting anything because we have, air flowing all the time. Right. But as we learned,
well, I think in your case, you had a house cleaner coming in and she wasn't properly cleaning. And I think that's a huge thing, like understanding that if a lot of people don't realize you're either allergic to pollen, dust, or mold. And if you have all three and you're not properly cleaning it, it's going to build up and become, obviously unhealthy for people who are sensitive, like your son, your husband, your daughter. And every time you're going into a space that has that collection of dust that hasn't been cleaned because your house cleaner wasn't cleaning it properly, then you take something out and then it's airborne for hours. So mold spores like to stick to dust. And so when people assume, oh, I have no mold, I'm like, well, you're gonna have mold because if you have dust, you're gonna have mold there, and it's gonna pull up on my sample. But the predominant species that were found was the Aspergillus penicillium, and that was, the raw count was 11,655 compared to 155, was that 155, 100, 400 per cubic meter, which is really high. That's like 100%. And that's usually, when I see that, it's usually because there's a high dust accumulation on surfaces or it was hidden, it was underneath, desks and in areas you wouldn't even think to look. Like everything else looks clean, but there's all these other surfaces that people, if they're not cleaning it, will build up. So
yeah, we found like when we're looking through the house, I mean, after like starting to really deep clean, it's like just our walls are textured, right? And so you don't realize that the walls, even though they're white and because they're textured, it collects all these little dusts all over, and you don't you get like up on the ceiling, like close up high, and then you're like looking and you're like, oh my gosh, there's dust all over this. So then you have to wipe these white walls that you didn't realize were dirty. And then
you have carpeting.
The carpet, like the very corners of the carpet around the edges of where the walls meet and everything in the baseboards, like those areas behind all the furniture and, where your clothes are, and in the closets, and these little tiny places that, the cleaners will dust everything and clean like top surfaces, and then it'll look like clean, but it wasn't that clean, right? So
Right,
we had to
right.
do the deep cleaning, and after doing the deep cleaning, and then the recommendation for buying a
HEPA filter.
HEPA filter, what was it? Like the
The
air
the
purifier?
vacuum. Well, also a vacuum, it's really important. And most
Yeah.
vacuums now are made with a HEPA filtration system. You also have a dog too, so it's really important to, everything gets trapped. So you want to get like a high filtration vacuum system, which helps not to disperse all those particles that you're kicking up while you're vacuuming into the air, which can cause people to have more allergy-like symptoms. So because I have allergies, when I'm really doing my deep cleaning of my spaces, because my kids also have allergies, I usually wear N95 masks because it will bother me for hours, even when I have the windows open. So I always recommend when people are cleaning, let those windows open, let ventilation come through, because the solution to your pollution is dilution, right? With anything. So I love that term. But also, what you had was common indoor-outdoor mold spores. So,
It
that's
was just like a high count that
it's
was
very high. It's very
like
high.
a very high count to where it's understandable. And so we ended up getting it was an expensive air purifier for their room. And that alone and the cleaning all together, and then we did like a deep carpet cleaning.
Yeah.
It really, like, they were actually like, it was night and day as to how much they were better. Like Charlie doesn't wake up coughing like she used to, like getting out all this gullah gullahs, like she's been sitting in it all night long, because we're not always home, right? And we're not spending as much time in our small apartment. We're always out and about. But when it was worse is when they would get up in the morning, because they've been there for 8 or 10 hours sleeping.
Oh, totally. And then, it's, with respect to your son, whether he's allergic to mold or dust. He may not be allergic to mold unless he had a mold test done. It may be the dust accumulation. But people who are sensitive, when they have that nasal drip and that irritation into their lungs, it's just gonna, cause all this, coughing and wheezing and sneezing and, all these respiratory issues and concerns. So to help mitigate somebody who is sensitive with asthma or to any allergy is just, reduce exposure as much as possible. And it's like, I don't tell my clients to live in a bubble, it's Hawaii's a beautiful place. I also don't tell my clients how to live. I just kind of work with what their needs are and their objectives are and what they already have. Some people can't put a huge AC system in their house, even though they want to, but they can't afford it. So, hey, let's work with what you have and let's go through your home and let me give you some pointers. Some people absolutely love carpet, even though they hold tons of pollutants in there. Okay, you love your carpet. Let's figure out ways where, if you are sensitive, let's figure out how I can help you, since you love that carpet, maintain, your indoor environment. So it's all about minimizing indoor pollutants and improving indoor air quality.
Awesome. So I recommend you reaching out to Lindsay and their company if you have any type of these kind of symptoms, or you're feeling like, hey, I wonder about my house, or and it doesn't affect everybody the same. Like, I really don't have any of the problems that the rest of my family has.
You're lucky.
And I did when I was little, when I was in Oahu, and maybe it's the mildew and in the so always wet there, and maybe it was a certain pollen and type of plants that were growing in that type of.
You grew out of it too.
But a drier environment for me has been better from when I was a kid.
Yeah.
But that's why I never thought, like, it wasn't until just this time when my husband is bringing this up that I thought it could be something with the air. So it is, and we definitely are we got a new cleaners. They come like every 2 weeks now. And we have deep cleaning and recorder. We definitely, it's an important thing. And just with the kids getting sick and then trying to recover faster, especially for a little one, it does help a lot. So these are the kinds of things that if we can help families with their indoor air quality, their kind of health, healthy family lifestyles, this is one of them. So let's see, before I get into anything else, I know we talked about all of these things. Let's talk about a little bit more on the air conditioning and the ventilation systems and the things that you do for that, and why that's important and how it's even connected to what we're talking about.
Well, I consider your air conditioning system like the lungs of your home. It's your air delivery to every occupied space in your home, your child's room, your room, the living room, any livable space. So yes, filters. I mean, people are like, well, I changed my filters, and that is absolutely great. That's really important. But
a lot of people don't.
That's true. I've seen some really bad ones, or they just bought a home and the home, but prior to them had cats. So they're not only allergic to mold, but now they have cats in their system, so, or they had renovation.
How do you get rid of that? Just changing out the filters? I'm totally, we're allergic to cats.
Oh, so am I. I love them, but I'm allergic to cats 100%. Yeah, it's just, whatever it is, pets, you had a renovation done. Sometimes you have people coming in, doing renovation when you're not there, they're running that system. Well, guess what? When you come back, you're going to be breathing in all that, building material, which isn't very healthy for you either, right? And it just depends on usage. And obviously here we don't have that heating component like the mainland does for, heating our ventilation systems. We don't need it. We live in a tropical environment. So that environment is constantly damp and wet, and over time mold's going to grow. Also, a lot of the time I see in our systems, we have fiberglass insulation or fiberglass in attic spaces. So from an indoor air quality standpoint, that's not healthy either. Once fiberglass becomes, deteriorated, it will become airborne and people breathe that in. So also it makes it really hard to efficiently clean the system in those areas. So we always offer to encapsulate it. Instead of telling you, hey, replace your whole system, why don't we encapsulate it, make a brand new surface? It becomes this hardened surface, and then you don't need to do it again. And then for future cleaning, it's just the same process. You don't have to keep doing it over and over again.
How often do you need to change your AC filters?
I think every 3 months is a good, every 3 months max, but it just depends. I mean, every system isn't created equally. Every usage isn't created equally. I mean, like I said, if you have pets, I'd change it, maybe more frequently. If you're more sensitive, change it more frequently, but also think that the dirtier, it's kind of a weird thought, but it's kind of like a screen, although your screens can cause your allergies too, but the dirtier it gets, it actually stops more particles from flowing in. So you just want to change it out in a good amount of time. So it continuously does its job. And what was the other question you're gonna ask?
Oh no, just on how often to change them. And we're kind of wrapping things up here. So okay. Is there anything else you think that you would like to share, go over? Because I don't want to miss anything that they should know.
No, I just always recommend, I mean, there's a lot of information on the web, just like when I was pregnant, and I'm like on the web, and, it's like placebo effect, and, can feed your mind in so many ways. And, I just recommend people kind of being more aware of their home and what's going on in their home, number one, or how they feel. And it's not always mold. Sometimes it can be the air fresheners they're using, or they're living down a busy street and it's the carbon soot coming in, or maybe it's the dust, So unless you really know what you're allergic to.
Or
If
laundry
you-
detergent. That's
laundry detergent, fragrances,
new
chemical
soaps that people use.
I'm telling you, like my daughter loves perfume, so do I, but she sprays it and I start sneezing for hours after that. So everybody's sensitivities are different, and that's what makes us feel so unique. But a lot of time people are like, oh, it's mold, mold, mold. And well, yeah, mold's everywhere. I mean, so when I do my sampling and it's like lower than the outdoors and they're still telling me it's a mold issue. And I'm like, well, that, what you're breathing outside is higher. So maybe it's not, you know, or maybe it's a certain kind of mold, or, you know, it's sometimes really easy and sometimes it's more of an investigative process. So I just tell people to be your own doctor and kind of, you know, put down a log and jot down your symptoms, and obviously go see your doctor. We're not doctors, but we can certainly work with your healthcare professionals with respect to what you're allergic to.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah.
So let's say somebody wants to get a rundown of their home, get a healthy check with you. What do they do?
We'll call.
How do they reach you? What's the way to reach Lindsay and AirCare?
Best way is my cell. Well, let's not give out my cell. Just our business line, 593-9600. Obviously, you got to put the 808 now. Or they can email me at lindsay@aircarehawaii.com. Anytime, visit us on our website. You can fill out a contact form there. But yeah, reach out anytime and we can, you know, I'm going to ask you certain questions just so I can understand what's going on with you and your home or what you're experiencing. And then we can kind of finalize the best course of action.
Awesome. And she was super awesome with us and walked us through everything, gave us a whole bunch of pointers. And I know in our situation, we were able to tackle this on our own, but should there have been a leak or there have been something more, you know, they also have those resources for you as well. So you're not sitting there trying to reach out to anybody else. They kind of are a one-stop shop for this type of stuff. So anyhow, without further ado, I wanted to wrap things up, and I think that's all we have for you today. Thank you, Lindsay, so much for your time.
I appreciate it.
For all of you, thanks for listening. And don't forget to subscribe to our podcast at www.smartlivinghi.org. And then you can also find us on our Instagram. And if you look up smartlivinghawaii.org or that space.org, you can find us on Facebook. And until next time, live smart.
Oh, yeah.